I'm MJ. I'm the founder of Ultra Love. Happy to be here with you guys. I I feel like talking about emotional intelligence and healing and how they go together. And so much of what we are facing externally is pointing back to our collective and individual healing. And yet, even often when I say certain words, I'm aware that we can interpret that in a certain way. This requires a certain level of discernment and nuance because we are all different. We're all going to have a different way or a different process in transforming our perception. And again, the perception has a lot to do with like anchored belief systems. And the belief systems are kind of traced into our ancestral lineage, which then also connects to epigenetic transformation, or like changing our genetic coding, our soul's karma, which is really like the soul spark, the divine spark, the little voice inside, the kind of impulses, it's like this knowing within yourself of the things that you're here to resolve, the things that you're here to create, right? And just the conundrum, paradox, and beauty of the human life. And then we have social and cultural programming, which is more of a kind of generational idea of how we're learning and biofeedbacking with our people, the people that are around us, internet and real life, but more real life. So feeling is healing, they say, right? And how the kind of step-by-step process or ongoing process as well for sort of activating more of your divine clarity, more of your divine spark, and then the responsibility we have as an individual to do the thing. So, I spent 20 years teaching yoga. When I started reading books and practicing yoga, I did the practice, right? And then eventually the practice led to more training, and the training led to having a professional career. And then with regards to entrepreneurialism, reading tarot, sharing on the internet, that was also very kind of guided. And I had to actually do the thing and make the content and write the book and publish the book. And so the action steps required when we're following our soul, when we're following our intuition, and how it really is this internal thing that's going on within us all the time, and a kind of through changing, morphing, adapting some of our patterning to align more with who we feel ourselves to be, which personally I would say trying to move us more to joy, freedom, divine expression, feeling regulated, right? Like, or certainly having the tools to be able to regulate ourselves, honesty, vulnerability, empathy, compassion, right? So that I would go like we're kind of moving in waveforms, so trust in the ups and downs, but we're also moving in dynamic spirals, right? If you look at kind of sacred geometry and cycles of the planets and God, it's like how to put it into words. Like we are the universe embodied. We are the cycles of the planets embodied. We are in kind of co-creative dance with the entire cosmos, including the planet. So when we look at our society, right, democracy and politics and all these isms, racisms, and now, never to discount one's personal reality, right? And yet, when we have the privilege to come to transformational work, upgrading our DNA, or just changing, being able to consciously kind of take hold of the reins of personal change, usually in my personal experience, allegedly, it requires emotional work, like really deep emotional work, i.e., shadow work. And part of the shadow work is from within self to own the emotions that we're feeling. And I heard another creator recently talk about like, and I'm like, of course, but somehow, you know how you hear the same thing over and then someone says it in a way that you're like, huzzah. Pardon me. Um, but really, truly, when we get triggered, when emotions come up, to hold space for the emotional body and endeavor to detach from thought, or detach enough to perceive the thought form that's going through the mind when stuff's coming up, right? And how to breathe through and how to allow that emotional trigger point to then send the shockwaves into the emotional body so that you can have, I guess, the courage, the holding of space within yourself to allow the body, the miraculous, infinitely intelligent body, to transform and shift, you could say, the cellular activity that is kind of traced by the superficiality of that trigger. And this is where we often have to kind of break through the idea of rational thinking, because that ideation really comes from the wound of separation. And that's part of what we're bridging collectively, is to be living in a higher harmonic, more divinely aligned, in resonance to the soul of desiring a healthier, more harmonious, more shared, more loving, more compassionate planet, that we simply trust in the process and know that the emotional body is intertwined and connected with the totality of who we are. And so our ability to just see thought form as like certain ingredients, and even maybe not necessarily the most important ingredients, but like ingredients to a broader recipe or dish that you're creating that just requires you to throw those out for now, or I'm not explaining it necessarily great. So like you detach from thought and just let the body do its thing. And then wait till you're kind of on the other side of the emotional processing. So you get triggered, you hold space, detach from thought, and just allow yourself to breathe through the anxiety, the fear, the resentment, the shame. You might see certain thought form, you might have certain memory. And then on the other side, it's like the peace after the storm, or the calm after the storm, where you're like, your body has released information that somehow is connected to that trigger, that inception trigger. And so what you'll notice over time of doing more emotional work is, and I'm noticing the process is happening quicker and quicker, where you just don't, the trigger isn't the same. The over time, the things that once trigger you don't trigger you, and or they're not triggering you as intensely, or that you can at least hold space with more presence as those triggers come in. But and yet trust also that there's like a profound learning. So personally, the last sort of 5-6 years, I've been doing shadow work for like almost 15 years, and or possibly my entire life, just not consciously. And then consciously, 2013, there was a huge shift where I really could see the efficacy of emotional shadow work, right? But trusting in that process, I suppose, is a huge part of trusting the intelligence of the body, and hala, and allowing that to kind of purge out, because that essentially is what clarifies the emotional body to perceive more clearly, to perceive from a place of love, to and then these things, these words we throw around like integrity. What does integrity mean? You have to have empathy to have integrity. And you have to be consciously using a sort of compassionate framework and loving framework to anchor in that integrity. Why? Because to me, integrity is coming from a place of unified connection. The mycelium, right? Like the network, the invisible network that connects us all. Oh, we're endeavoring more and more and more of us to like align with that higher timeline for the entirety of humanity. So it's a funny thing because that matrix system, the patriarchy, a lot of our cultural social programming was like, don't listen to your intuition, disconnect from the emotional body. We inherit from our lineage various traumas. We are traumatized usually as children, somehow even crying out, being left, being neglected. Like, we're all generationally endeavoring, not all obviously, but like a lot of us are wanting to, because we want to have a better life, right? We want to live more authentically, all this kind of stuff, which to me just means we feel better and more ourselves, right? And then we can go through cycles and align ourselves with those higher timelines and things that resonate with us. But there's a fair bit of, so we have our personal ancestry, we have our soul's purpose for why we're here, and then we have, of course, social, cultural indoctrinations and programming, which are in many ways like more obvious, but then also like very painful sometimes. Or I want to say, actually, for a lot of people, even endeavoring healing in this system, there's a lot of blind spots. There's blind spots within the ancestral lineage, and there's blind spots within our inherited privilege, perhaps, or victimhood, right? Or oppression. So, like, the convergence of going, healing through all that stuff, and then still going, okay, here I am, and I'm going to align myself to my higher vision, to my higher timeline, to that which I deserve, to that which I feel into, to be of the highest service. And then the more you keep choosing that through repetition, you will feel in your physical body visceral releases. And I remember talking about this when I was writing my book and taking some bigger leaps in my life, where I like, people talk about this stuff, and yet I kept wanting to hone in on the fact that it's visceral. So it's like endeavoring to heal an emotional loop, but not feeling it, talking about it rather than feeling it, and moving through to the root in that moment of what that trigger is pointing to. As an example, one of my earliest sort of emotional alchemical, like being really present with it, I was in a relationship at the time, and I was having a freak out around cleanliness. Like, I would be one of these people, I'd possibly go around cleaning people's houses, or like I couldn't settle when things weren't clean. But it was becoming like an OCD problem. And I was tired, we'd been traveling, and I started like freaking out, like kind of slamming doors and cleaning everything, because and my partner at the time, we're still good friends, he was like, what he started slamming. And then it kind of led to kind of a fight. And then eventually I kind of slammed the door, and it was almost like he was going to leave. And I, again, after quite a few years of meditation and yoga, bear in mind, because meditation can often give us the courage and the strength and the resiliency, so can a healthy physical body, to actually hold space for deeper, more painful emotions, right? So I'm all angry, and it's all his fault because the house isn't clean and he doesn't help and blah, blah. But because he did that thing where he started he reflected my own behavior back to me. And I was a bit like, oh. And then, so in that moment, because again, I was practicing all these understand through compassion, I was like holding space for myself, going, or like blaming him isn't compassionate. And like the intensity of the reactivity, the trigger, so profound. And I was just like, okay, what's the energy? So I hold space for this anger, and I feel this heat and sensation. And then a memory comes in. Shortly after my parents got divorced, there was like quite a bit of patterning, and I would have been like 6 or 7 years old, where I'd get home from school. My sister and I would come home from school, and my mom, there was probably like, I think she was teaching at the time. So then there would be like an hour or 2 hours where we were home alone. But there was obviously quite a few memories of mom coming home from work super angry, like pissed off that we hadn't cleaned enough, or whatever. Like enough times where like I was traumatized by it, right? And like hyper vigilant, like make sure it's clean so that mom doesn't get angry, kind of thing. So I have that memory, jump back, whatever, in 2012, this would have been. And then so instead of getting angry and just blaming the other person, thinking they need to change for me to resolve, it was like feeling the anger, having that memory, and then suddenly I'm crying and I'm having massive compassion for myself because I suddenly understand where that behavioral pattern comes from. And that was just really mind-blowing. And then skip ahead 13, 14 years, it's like all bringing me back to the deeper mother wound and the ancestral lineage, and like you could say the different multidimensional aspects of self that kind of coalesce and come into the present moment as a being who is then able to create and manifest higher timelines, or like more consciously aware timelines, because they're not running those unconscious deeper programs, whether social and cultural. Here's the thing, my loves, like at this point, straight up legit, like the entire kind of world as we've been bought and sold it, or as we've been sold it and then bought in, is a lie. It's a falsity. And why is that? Well, one, because it's not connected to our nature. It disregards and kind of overlay, rather than being connected to nature, the planet, her cycles, the cosmos. It fractures that connection. So it denies that connection and kind of overlays this sort of extraction, parasitic. That's where we get into spiritual warfare conversation, or just straight up like the military war complex on this planet. Increasing awareness around corruption of government, but all of it is this sort of straight up universal and personal, one, earthly evolution, but also like pointing back to us how we have to reclaim our power. And that means our personal freedom, and that means our ability to communicate, and that means our ability to like be who we are and be who we desire to be, right? Because the soul knows that which the mind does not. Like the soul knows, and we just kind of have to trust in the process. And that's where even things like aligning, having visions, or having or why we want to be better at holding space for uncertainty, for confusion, for curiosity, because once we're working through some of those denser emotions, call it the karmic backlog, call it your ancestral lineage, whatever, right? Like again, it's a multifold or multidimensional reality. Just because it is, because you can think of dimensions as like, I'm a human that you're seeing on the screen, but I'm also a human having thoughts and experiences and visions. And so we're all these like total fields of information that are interacting with other fields of information that are then interacting in a multidimensional, infinitely expansive universe. And that's where it's like you can see those images of the universes or the galaxies where it's just like this infinite void with little specks of light. When you look at that, you can think of that as your own being drifting in the void as a speck of light or a speck of consciousness, right? And then we're all trying to rationalize and understand how to heal, how to live more authentically. But then it's also like that's up to us as individuals to explore. And some of us, I think, that are navigating that are just here to be like, guys, like you can heal. It's free. You just have to learn how to hold space for your triggers, waves, and storms. You are naturally sort of a clairvoyant, psychic, intergalactic creator. It's just that we're not, en masse. Certainly, we haven't kind of shifted into that. But you think of Star Wars, Star Trek, we think of the things that we hold in our imagination as an aspect of reality. And that's another part of the multidimensionality. But what we don't want is to be kind of programmed by that culture. Bringing it back to culture is that when you think of the overlay and the parasitic extraction model of the current or previously dominant paradigm, what we're having to do is like unpack all of those inherited belief systems slash paradigms that we're projecting into the field, and like unmask it all, uncover it all, purge it from within self, to then visualize and come back into alignment with a higher vision. Because more and more of us, I think, are understanding pretty much like every single institution, every single system, and maybe not exactly, but like the majority of that world that we were bought and sold into is like collapsing and not biologically sound. Like it's not good for us as a species. So we're gonna, as in just being consumers and workers and slaves to shopping and slaves to addictions, because we're all in it. We're all dealing with our own stuff as we go along this journey. And there again, there's the nuance, beware of people that pretend to be like a godly figure, because we're all human. And it's that visceral connectivity. That's why as we move through Pluto and Aquarius, Neptune and Aries, etc., those illusions are going to increasingly shatter. More and more people are going to awaken. More and more people are going to be like, see ya, like, let's create community over here and let's live this way and let's live it, like breaking the rules. And I remember doing something called Awesomeness Fest back in 2014. And then I remember the director guy would always say rules, as in the bullshit rules. Rules. I think it was something like that. So like so many of these rules and laws and regulations are coming from that limited paradigm. And once you kind of break out of that and break free from that, your life just becomes like a living miracle. And I'm not saying that to be like, it's easy. No, it's like super difficult, but so is being a slave to the system that destroys the entire planet, right? So it's like when we align with our heart's code, we kind of align with a clearer vision. It just don't think it's going to be all easy, because all at once, as I say these words, feeling quite aligned and activated and like and feeling like sharing, feeling like expressing myself, one thing that I'll reflect to is the amount of emotional pain that has been ongoing. And just through completing another cycle and coming to the other side, giving myself time to like reframe, readjust, I'm just sharing more of that process, is that it can go so deep that your rational mind is kind of blown away. And you're just having to survive. Like and that was like just surviving, just trying to get through the day, just you know and oh yeah, and then I did write something about, so like how survival mode. Hey there, hey, what's going on? I try not to engage too much with comments, because previously when I'd do lives, I would get triggered and then go way off track. So although I must say last time there were some snarky comments, and I think I handled them really well. And I think I saw Viviane, so I just want to say shout out to Viviane. You're also an early riser, my lover. Okay, so survival mode, and how like most of us with trauma, most of us that grew up with financial issues from our family lineage and all that kind of stuff, like there's just straight up survival mode everywhere. Like even threatening war, violence, like violence comes out of survival. It's like you don't have a desire to kill other people if you're not in survival. Even as nice as it might look with billions of dollars, with billions of dollar bills in the bank, if you're raging war and slaughtering loads of innocent people, you're in survival. Your mind-body complex is desperately trying to survive. And this is part of, I think, of end stage capitalism, is that we're seeing these monstrous aspects of our humanity like shockingly stare us back in the face, and we've got to be like, that's not who we are anymore. We might have come to this point, but we can change, and we have the power to change, and we have the power to imagine something better. So survival mode is inherently fear-based, and that's where I think people talk a lot about like the reptilian nature, a kind of lower working from the base chakras, like, right? And that's where you get things like hedonism and more primal desires, which isn't bad or good. It's just an aspect of our evolutionary process, right? So survival mode is inherently fear-based, and it has us wrapped up in programming. And that was a big blind spot for me, was my ancestral lineage, and having a massive blind spot there. And then around pandemic, being pulled back and not realizing how burnt out my nervous system was, because I didn't have roots. because I didn't I didn't have enough support in the physical dimension. Jump ahead 6 years later, I'm more supported, I'm more grounded, I've just gone through a cycle that was like the most painful thing ever 5, 6 years ago. And I've just been through another cycle, not nearly as painful. I can see it way more clearly, which is very liberating. And it's a kind of culmination of healing the mother father wound, but primarily the mother wound, because Earth is female. And most of us are dealing with a denial on a cultural, global level, more of a denial of the feminine aspect, more of a denial of our, this is men and women alike, right? There's no real division, but I talk about the feminine from that, I guess, archetypal perspective, where it's the darkness, it's the void, it's the invisible, it's the emotional. So if we're only honoring an aspect of self, which is the illusion of separation, we're just all running around in an illusion, hence ignorance, right? Once we awaken to our divinity and we start to work with that as a regenerative aspect of a divine cellular coding, we then begin to express that. We then begin to kind of channel and express that, which we are seeing more and more people channeling, more and more people healing, right? To be the channel, or to be a clear channel. Thank you guys so much for being here. I wonder if time for base. I wonder if you can like, because I know what you mean about like everything going dark, but it's like the inner eye. But I don't know about a fantasia. I'm sure if it's a thing, it's a thing, and or like a feeling sensory experience rather than a visual experience. You feel me? My book, my book is called The Fearless Life Guide. It's on Amazon, or if you check out my website, you can find it through the website. And my book really does just talk about a bunch of the stuff I've just been talking about. But I did publish it at the end of 2016. It was released officially, I think, in 2017. So it's evolved, like, as far as like, holy Shazam, I maybe would have worded certain things or kind of taken us away from, because I talk about increasing our vibration, but I don't really see it like going higher. Like, I don't see it in those polarities of ascension, descension. I see it more as like more and more humans somehow being guided into an activation of their field. And it's like we kind of activate the synergistic and regenerative. So that's like the regenesis. To me, it's an aspect of the Christed self. And that and I'm just talking, like, I'm not pretending to be a Christed being. And yet I'm aware that with great love and compassion, holy Shazam, we are able to break out of illusions. We are able to transform patterns. We are able to change. And yet we have to be able to bridge the unknown. We have to be able to have the courage to live in uncertainty and possibly solitude. I'm hardcore introvert, as in, at this stage of my life anyway, like, I definitely need time alone. And I actually need like a proper decompression and downtime if I've been socializing a fair bit. However, collectively speaking, I also think that as a practice, there's value in sacred solitude. There's value in just writing down your thoughts. There's value in going for a quiet walk. There's value in silence. Like, put your phones away and just be. It's not rocket science, that's for sure, but we are divine, right? Like it's just so miraculous. And it's funny to actually even consider the other, as in like to consider people who are like, although like I've probably been there too, but like that are just so miserable and so angry and so kind of disgruntled, and I can have so much oh God, but like that's where compassion comes in, is because like there again you can understand that that's what they've inherited, or that's what they're vibrating. And when you think of eternalness and you think of the infinite, that which we are, it's like, don't worry, because everybody's got an infinite amount of time to resolve stuff. As in, the only thing you need to resolve is your own self. To thine own self be true. It wasn't saying be true to political leaders. It wasn't saying even be true to the great prophets and messengers of our historical framework. It's a to thine own self be true. So it's like, get to know yourself, my lovers. And how do we do that? By living your life and being present to the choices that you're making. Brain heart coherence. What are you thinking and feeling about? And when you get triggered, how can you hold space for yourself to work through that trigger and to endeavor to trace it within the light of your awareness to resolve? And just be patient. Again, I can say with the eventual leading into like profound mother father wounding and healing and greater clarity, that was um 5.5 years, 5.5 years of going round and round and round. And then before that, like, and it's just ongoing. I mean, part of me thinks if I'm triggerless, I might as well be dead. But because then it goes, I'm aware at this stage too that you can get triggered into the higher vibratories, and that can be a bit ungrounded. So that's something also I'm anticipating. Like when things start getting really good, don't freak out or don't start making really impulsive decisions, because that's a big learning for me in the past, where I've started manifesting just incredible things, and then hardcore burnout, and then deeper dive into the darkest seabed of creation, where it's like, God, I'm glad I'm still here, because there are plenty of moments within that where I thought, I don't know if I can like do this anymore, but here we are. And I am happy to be here. And thank you guys for hanging out with me on YouTube. If you like it, thanks, because I've seen that some of you have liked it. If you want to follow along for more updates, I do have a Patreon community. Patrons get a weekly exclusive reading, including channeled messages just for the Patreon community. Top tier patrons get discounts to work with me. They also get access to the Be the Change online courses. And then the grassroots patrons just get the exclusive content. It's live and interactive, so it's like fun where we can chat like this, but you get the link sent to you. And then check out my website, and obviously you can subscribe here for free if you want to be able to join these live and have a little chat. I usually talk about healing. I read tarot for people and my clients. I teach online a lot of yoga and meditation with international clients. So yeah, it's always a joy to get to know people better who align with the work that I do. My book is for sale on Amazon. I do understand if you boycott Amazon, I try to boycott Amazon. I might create something where any sales for the book goes to a charity that's like boycotting corporation, or at some point find a better platform. But I appreciate it for the purpose of bringing my book to you guys. I just also, yeah, I'm a bit radical with not buying new things, denouncing fast fashion, eating conscientiously and consciously as a mostly vegan, although having a compassion for everyone's choices. But I love animals too much. I couldn't imagine actually slaughtering them unless I was like starving somewhere. But even then, I don't know. Silly. Anyway, let's go. Bye. Have a great day, you guys. And um, if you're amazing, Bradley Bear, you guys have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you for supporting my channel, and thank you for supporting my heart-centered brand, All to Love. It's really just a vision of a more loving world for everybody, for everybody. Peace out.